Welcome to Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we talk about everything from Jesus to joinery and lots of everything else in between. I don't know about out in Colorado, Tom, but the weather here has been kind of weird. We'll have a 70 degree day, beautiful blue skies, and then it'll snow the next day. And that's kind of what happened today. Yesterday, it was in the high 60s. It was beautiful out. Got some stuff done out in the duck coop, was outside, and I have metal roofing and I have it stacked next to the barn. And today crazy winds, and then it started snowing, but these winds were so wild, and normally they come from at our house from the back field, so from the east to the west, but for whatever reason today they're coming the opposite way. And I worked from home today, and I'm on lunch, and I'm out eating lunch with the family. And next thing you know, we hear a big whoosh and then a smack. And my wife's at the kitchen, and she looks out, and if that wind didn't grab one of them pieces of metal roofing, 12-foot long piece of metal roofing, if it didn't grab that thing, pick it up and throw it into the barn. I mean, it was kind of scary to watch it. We got on the camera because we have a camera pointed there and got on. I'll have to send you the video of it, but it was wild. That wind was just nuts out there. It's so it snowed. It's supposed to snow. We're going to get another 2 inches tonight. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm just and the grass is green and growing. And so I got to get out and mow the grass one of these days, but it's been too wet to mow the grass. And it's just me ranting about the weather is all it is.
Oh, man.
I don't know, man.
You know, the funny thing is when we were building our house, we put a metal roof on our house, and there was some metal that was left over, 16-foot long pieces, and then some shorter pieces as well. But we kept all the leftovers so that when I build me a little shed for the tractor or whatever, I can use it on that. We had all that stacked on one pallet and had something sitting on top of it. Dude, we had a windstorm come through, and it took those sheets of metal, blew them over in my neighbor's hayfield. Dude, I was collecting metal sheets from all over. And so my perfectly straight metal, a lot of it ended up getting bent up. But dude, I'm not talking about 10 foot away. I'm talking about several hundred feet away over the fence, all over his hayfield. And I had to go over to my neighbor. It's like, dude, I am sorry. He's like, man, I thought my barn was going to blow down. You have nothing to apologize about. But yeah, it was crazy. So I was collecting metal all over the place and getting it stacked back. But yeah.
We're not used to those winds here in Pennsylvania. In Tennessee, tornadoes and stuff all the time, just that crazy high wind. Even here in Pennsylvania, you can count on under one hand the amount of times a thunderstorm comes through. You'll get rain here, but not crazy thunderstorms. In Tennessee, my wife and I moved there, and I think it was the first week, just crazy thunderstorm, and we weren't used to that. That kind of freaked us out. We're like, what in the world? And come to find out, I mean, we've been through several tornadoes when we lived down there and stuff, and it's no fun. But to have those kind of winds here is kind of weird. Yeah. And so, but that metal, grab that metal and threw it, and I was like, whoa.
Dude, it's like a heavy kite. That's what it is.
Right.
We get wind here all the time because we live right between two canyons. So the wind kind of funnels in and across our property. Honestly, have we known how windy it got in this area, we probably might have fought at the other end of the valley, but we do love living here. But it's crazy how strong the winds get. We don't get tornadoes. I've never seen a tornado here since I've moved here. But, man, it's nothing for 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds to come through here, particularly in the spring, when the temperature has a big variation. It get cold at night and then warm up. Because we've been having, evenings where it gets down in 30s and 40s, and then it's been getting up in the 70s, 80s in daytime, and just been crazy variance. I was supposed to do a job a week and a half ago in Moab, that when I was supposed to do the job was getting down below freezing at night and only going to make it up to 50 and going to be windy. So we moved it back 1 week. In 1 week, it went from a high of 50 to it was almost 90 degrees when I was there working. It's crazy, man. I mean,
Yeah,
so yeah.
it's wild. Fun stuff. I'm just ready for the weather to figure out what it's going to do, and then I can get outside. We're going to plant a garden and, all this ducks and all this stuff we got going on. Just a lot of stuff, but awesome. Before we get into today's guest, I want to thank the patrons of the podcast. We appreciate you guys. And if you want to support the podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Faith Talks Wood. And we really thank you, all you guys that support us out there. Go over and give us a 5-star review on Apple. It goes a long way. It allows the podcast to be found. So thank you if you do that. And then pray for the podcast. We love what we're doing here, and we see it as a ministry for the Lord. And so pray for the podcast. And can't go without mentioning, too, if you need some sanding equipment, surfprepsanding.com, use code FAITH, get 10% off, and it helps the podcast out a little bit as well. So without further ado, Tom, who do we have on today's episode?
We have got Mr. Chris Ricketts, and he's been a listener of the podcast for quite a while. And I can't remember if I first contacted him or he contacted me first. It's been quite a while, but phenomenal woodworker, and I'm looking forward to hearing his testimony. So, man, Chris, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Tom, Will, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you guys. And to help jog your memory, Tom, you had reached out to me, and then I got an email from Will. And and the culmination is our time here tonight. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's certainly a privilege and an honor. And I really enjoyed hearing people's testimonies, and I've been encouraged. There have been a number of times where I've been able to relate to the guests, whether it's by geography or personal experience or paths that God has brought me along. And I'm excited to be on here and just share the time we have together. So I appreciate that.
Amen. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live,
Sure.
Work, family, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of get some of the biographical sketch stuff out of the way. I am kind of closer to you, Tom. I'm 52. And I think the other podcast you said you're 54. So pretty close. And I live in north central Indiana. I'm in a town called Rochester, a town of about 6,000 people. And as I said to Will earlier before we started recording, my whole county is 25,000 people. So I am in rural Indiana. I came here for work. I am my day job is as a rural family physician. And so I'm a family doctor here. Although my office is in a town a little bit north, a town of about 1,000 people. And I've been at that practice a little over 22 years.
Wow.
So I've been here for a while. And so after I did my family medicine training, I actually did a fellowship in high-risk obstetrics. So I deliver a lot of babies, and a lot of what I do is take care of women whose pregnancies are not normal. And it's a privilege to do that. So I'm very, very blessed to be here and very blessed to do what I was called to do. And later in our testimony, I'll talk about calling, and feel that is a huge part of following Christ, is just the idea of calling, regardless of what area of life we're talking about. So,
amen.
Excited to get into that. Yeah, you bet. And I'm an open guy, so you guys interject if you have questions, if whatever, just jump right in. Don't hesitate to interrupt me.
Awesome. Well, you talked about story and calling. So tell us about your faith journey, about, who is Chris, and what makes you tick? What's your passion, and who are you?
Sure. I'll give you an answer that lies deep within, and it's not an answer that many people can really just jump to. And I'll tell you, if you remember the story of Jonah, and of course Jonah's on the boat, they're in the storm, the guys are like, what's going on? And Jonah says, it's on me. And they're like, who are you? And they're like, I'm Jonah, and I serve the living God. And so I don't know if you guys remember that from Jonah chapter 1, but just the way that he answered that has just really resonated with me. Like, who am I? Like, because of the grace of Christ, like, I am a child of God. That is who I am. I am imperfect. I am a sinner. I am saved by grace, but I am a child of God because he has deemed it so. So as far as my faith journey, I have the blessing of having been raised in a Christian home. My parents are actually quite young. So I'm 52, as I mentioned, but I actually have memory of being in college class with my parents. Yeah, I know it. So my parents were young when they had me. The people listening to the podcast can't see your guys' faces, but your face was great there, Tom. It's like, whoa.
Man.
Yeah. So anyway, I actually have memory of being in class with my parents in college. They met at an American Baptist college called Judson College, just outside of Chicago. And so that's where I was born. My parents are both from Illinois, and we lived up and down Illinois till I was just finishing second grade. And then at the end of second grade, we moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I actually grew up in a small town, which is a suburb of Tulsa called Bixby, also a town of about 5,000 people. And I'm an only child. So it's just been my mom and dad and I. They're both thankfully still alive, and I'm very thankful for that. And so I grew up hearing the gospel, but there was a very clear time in fourth grade, and you guys I'm sure have experienced this in times past, where there would be a tent revival, and churches would have a summer, maybe a week-long special speaker, or they would have different itinerant pastors come in. So it was actually at one of those events when I was in fourth grade where I felt the clear and distinct call of God on my life. So I know a lot of people can't really kind of point to a specific time where they felt God call them to follow him. I am a person that can. And I just remember sitting in the bleachers that actually was held at our local high school football field. And I just was sitting there with my mom and dad, and I wasn't confident enough to go down by myself. I will freely admit that. But in the call of God, I said to my mom, let's go. And she's like, it's not over yet. And I said, no, I want to go down there, which means like down to the field where they're calling people to confess Christ and give their lives to Christ. And she's like, oh, okay. So it was a beautiful memory that stands out in God's grace in my life. So I gave my life to Christ then, fourth grade, was baptized shortly thereafter. And it was a Baptist church that I grew up in. And it was a good Bible believing, thriving church. And so there was some discipleship that happened. And for that, I'm thankful. I wish that I could say, and many of us can relate to a life of having sinful choices and, having sin in their life that they just wish weren't there. And I'm certainly right there with you. But God was faithful and has been faithful throughout my entire life. So we lived in Oklahoma from 3rd through 11th grade. So that's where I consider growing up. And it's interesting. One of your guests, not that long ago, I'm going to say 5 or 6 guests ago, talked about going to Falls Creek Camp. And he talked about, at the time, not following Christ and having some difficult experiences there. And listeners can go back to previous messages, podcasts, and kind of get the details on that.
I believe that was Damon Moran.
I think you're right. That actually does sound right.
So.
Yeah. Yes, I think that is right. Thank you. So I forget, 6th grade, 7th grade. I don't know. It was about 1984 or so that I was at Falls Creek Church or camp, and so it's kind of fun to make that connection with that guest of yours. So anyway. Then when I was a senior in high school, we moved to Indiana, And so I graduated high school from Indiana, and then from there, I went to Indiana University for undergraduate. And as I mentioned, I'm a doctor. I went to IU for medical school and then stayed for my family medicine residency. And anyway, so that gets more into the work side of things. But as far as God's faithfulness, pretty soon as I got into college, I got involved with Campus Crusade for Christ. And that was just so instrumental in my spiritual development. I quickly got involved in leading Bible studies and really grew from that. And with that developed a love for God's word and gained an appreciation for God's faithfulness, and gained an understanding that the busier I got, that it was even more important that I spent time in the Word. I think it's easy, and I've certainly been guilty at times of saying, "Oh gosh, there's so much going on," and you get to bed at night and you think, I should read, just read a verse. But I just really the Spirit worked on me through my college years and helped me develop some habits that honestly, 35 years later, still serve me well, and I'm thankful for that.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so you will ask a favorite Bible verse, and that's a story from my college years that we can kind of dive into at the end of the podcast, because it's a great story of God's love. So
That's
anyway,
awesome.
Yeah. So I was involved in an excellent church in college, a very strong Reformed church that was non-denominational, and just sat under a fantastic pastor. Went to church Sunday night, gained a love for going to church, and I had one core friend through two. I had two core friends through this time where we were just guys young in our faith and just really wanted to take it seriously. And that's not to give us credit, because man, we are sinners, and it's just the testimony of God's faithfulness to us. So shout out to my friend Scott and my friend Shelby, and I love you guys, and I'm thankful for the decades we have behind us. So from there, then like I said, I went from undergrad to medical school, was involved in Crusade. And then in medical school, there really isn't time for extracurricular activities per se. One of the friends that I mentioned stayed and worked in a graduate lab after we graduated college. So he and I continued living in the same city. He worked and I was in medical school, but he was my faithful brother. When I was studying 128 hours a week, he was there with me. And I'm just thankful for that. So there was this continuation of iron sharpening iron, and the fellowship that we had, and many times of praying and just seeking the Lord, and times we both have had times where God has felt silent, and just being that strong brother for the other. There's times, and I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to this, where there are just times where God feels distant, and it's not a sin issue. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just not. Sometimes it's just that point of your faith journey that God has you on that says, you know what, just keep trusting me, just keep reading the Word, and just keep being faithful. I'm here, just be faithful, and everything's going to be fine. But those days are hard. Those weeks, those months are hard. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
That reminds me of Elijah. When he went out, sat by the brook or creek, whatever you want to call it, under the tree, and sitting out there all by himself, feeling abandoned. It's like getting fed by a bird and drinking out the creek until it goes dry. And it's so often we can feel like we're a long way from God and everything else that needs to be done, but He's providing for our needs in a time of solitude, a time of, and there's something that comes out of that. And of course, we know the rest of that story. But yeah, that's awesome, man. Continue on.
So it's oh sure. Well, actually, I'll use what you just said as a little springboard, give a little teaser. So I'm pretty involved in our local church now, and in July I'm actually preaching. I preach about once a year, and I'm preaching. We're doing a long series through prayer, and the sermon that I'm preaching is from Mark 1, where Jesus goes into the a desolate place, is how the ESV calls it, and so I'm preaching on about that prayer of solitude, like pulling away and just being with God. So I love that. I love that segue.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
man.
yeah. So good stuff. So so this is where the issue of calling comes in. In late undergrad, I kind of had settled on being a doctor when I was a freshman in high school, and I thought about a variety of things, as we all do, seek out career ideas and decide, well, what do I want to do with my life? And so for me, through a variety of self-evaluation and feeling a sense of, well, I have this certain gifting, I have some abilities, like, well, what will God use them for? Like, how is this going to work out? So everything kind of naturally led to medicine. But it was late in undergrad, early in medical school, when the idea of this came to mind. Man makes doctors, but God makes healers. And I want to be a healer. Now, I have fallen down on that so many times, but that is the core of my calling. And when there were very hard days through medical school and residency and fellowship and in practice, there was just as a quick aside, like 2 weeks ago was one of the busiest weeks I've had in a long time. And by the time I went to bed Wednesday night, I had put in a 51-hour week. And, but the issue of calling, like, it's just, this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm supposed to be, and I'll sleep tomorrow. So, yeah,
That's
those
crazy.
don't happen very often. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, I had a question.
Yeah.
Being in the medical field, being a physician,
Yes.
have you found having faith in Jesus a challenge as far as the scientific community? I know that there is a stigma in the scientific community, and kind of the atheist runs wild kind of thing. Have you found that to be the case, at least in your experience?
So I've got a couple of great stories to kind of highlight this. The easy answer is it's almost never been an issue.
Okay.
It just, no, sometimes this could be lack of stepping out in faith on my part, not making Christ as big of a deal as I probably should have. So, I gotta take ownership over that. But I will say that when I'm seeing people, and if I may mention God or mention Christ, or I say, wow, God has really blessed you, or it seems like, or what I'll do is I talk about brain chemistry a lot with people. And I say, well, this is how God made us. Like, this is how we're wired. This is how we're made. So I try to be very explicit when I talk about, body chemistry, biochemistry, medicine, like, well, this is how God put us together. This is how we're made. So just really give glory to the Creator. The other story, which is a fun story, and these are people that I've lost contact with decades ago, were two classmates of mine in medical school, and I was, at the time I didn't feel like I was confident in my faith, but for whatever reason they really honed in on the idea that I was a Christian, and these two people, a man and a woman, they were just brilliant. I don't know what they ended up doing, but I know it was something big in the world of medicine. And we were eating lunch one day. We were both fourth-year medical students. They said, I got to tell you, I've never actually met a real Christian that actually believed it and seemed to walk it, but was in medicine. So it was this collision of worldviews that there's like, wow, so there's actually people like you out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I hate to say that, growing up in the church I grew up in, I think that's kind of why I didn't grow in my faith stronger at a young age, is because it was more of a church was a habit. We went to church on Sunday and we went to church on Wednesday night. And just like we went to Boy Scouts on Monday night and we went to baseball practice, it was a part of the routine. And all my friends went to church, just like my friends went to Boy Scouts or whatever. But then I didn't really, I can look back and see a handful of people now that I'm older, like they were living it out. But there were a lot of people we went to church with that were no different than me as a teenager. That was, okay, that's what you do on Sunday. You go to church on Sunday morning, and you go to grandma's house afterwards and eat dinner.
Sure.
And
Right.
it wasn't until I was 40 and started going to a church where, in fact, I didn't start going to the church until after I met 3 different people from the church at the rock climbing gym. I got invited to the same church multiple times by different people. But in the rock climbing gym, somebody introduced me to the pastor, Pastor Joe, that was in there rock climbing. And then every time he'd come in, he'd see me and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And we'd sit down and talk and he'd ask questions. But he was living it out. And it was such a amazing example. It's like, this dude is so different. He's not like any pastor I've ever met before. And it changed my life, man, because he's the one who's like, come on, just come to church this Sunday. What's it going to hurt?
Right, exactly. Love it.
Yeah, I find that I know people in the scientific community that it seems like as they get closer to understanding the body, it almost proves God's existence, right? Like our bodies are miraculous, the way that we're put together and the way that we're wired.
Absolutely.
And you can't study it without studying the Creator, because we're not a blob of something that came out of nothing, right?
That's so true. There is a class that you take in medical school called embryology. And embryology, think embryo, it's the study of human development. And so in this class, you learn all the steps, like on a very cellular, granular level, like from, of course, the egg and the sperm meeting, and then it takes off from there to the oocyte and the zygote and all that. So anyway, so you learn all these steps. And then you learn what goes, like if you have a problem or some disruption in that step, like what's the consequence? Like, is it, does life cease, or do you have, 16 arms, to exaggerate, kind of what happens? And at the time, as I was studying this, I was dating my wife, but I wasn't married yet. And I said, it's amazing. Like, it's truly a miracle that any of us turns out normal. When you just study and learn, like from the very inception and conception, all the steps, like, it's amazing that any of us turns out normal. Like, what a testimony to the Creator.
Yeah. And and that's one thing, like the whole evolution theory, like how, basically a pack of firecrackers exploded and all of a sudden humans were formed with eyeballs and mouths and organs, a heart, intestines. I mean, there's so much that goes into our body just to function on a daily basis. And like just how we take a bite of food and how it processes through our body. And I mean, it's phenomenal. It
is. Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. You guys are right on. Like, I'm right on the same page.
I'll never forget. I saw a talk by Louis Giglio about laminin.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And that like blew my mind. Have you ever seen that?
The cross shape laminin. Yep, I'm right with you.
Have you ever seen that, Tom?
No, I haven't.
Go on YouTube tonight.
Okay.
And search Louis Giglio laminin.
Okay.
And he gives this like 20-minute talk about laminin and how it represents the Creator and the cross and stuff. Okay. It's like, it blows your mind.
All right. I'll go look that up tonight.
He has a similar, so that's kind of on a microscopic level. On a cosmic level, he also has a talk where he kind of pans out through the cosmos and just talks about the different constellations and the different solar systems that are out there. And so you can it's the same glorious expanse of God. It's
I actually have that DVD. Yeah. I just found it today.
Oh,
it's
how
called
fun.
How Great Is Our God, I think it's called.
Okay.
And it talks about the expanse. I was going through some stuff in the closet. I got a nice bookshelf, and so I got all my theological books and all my textbooks from Bible college and stuff. And I was like, what is this? Oh, it's Louis Giglio. It's a talk from and it's about it's the expanse and the size of the galaxies and stuff. But awesome. We'll continue on.
Sure. Yeah. So kind of in medical school, not a lot of time for extracurricular activities, but still went to the same church my first 2 years of medical school that I was at in undergrad. And then the summer, so May 30 of 1996, my wife and I met, and we started dating on May 1st of 97. Oh, scratch that. I'm off a year. I'm so sorry. We met May 30 of 95. We started dating May 1 of 96. We got engaged June 14th. So six weeks after dating, 6 weeks, 2 days, we got engaged. And then we had a 51-week engagement and then got married in June of 97. So we are coming up on our 28th anniversary, and she is amazing. I will speak the whole podcast about my wife. So
that's awesome.
She is amazing. Her name's Laura, and she is just phenomenal in every sense of the word. So pretty much then we got married between my third and fourth years of medical school. Her story is relevant because after she graduated college, she actually was a missionary with YWAM, and one of your other podcasters,
Adam Yeri.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Right. So she did her discipleship training school. So she's from Michigan, went to university in Canada. And after graduating, she graduated college in the early 90s. She went to DTS out in Oregon. And my wife is a polyglot. So what that means is she absorbs languages. So by the time she graduated college, she was basically fluent in French and fluent in Russian. And from her time, this is 1991, she graduated college. This is when the USSR opened. This is when Russia opened. And she was a missionary to Mongolia for a year.
Wow.
So she is amazing and just a spiritually mature woman in every sense of the word. And so she was a missionary, taught English as a second language, lived in Hong Kong for 3 months, lived in Siberia for a winter. Just crazy stuff. So when we met, she was like, she had lived life. She wasn't a typical, 20 whatever, just come out of college or grad school. Like, she had lived life and went back to grad school to get her master's in education. And it was during that time that we were both in grad school that we met, and then got married between my third and fourth years of medical school. So from the standpoint of like professional development, like, she's been there almost from the beginning.
Wow.
So she's been there through medical school, residency, fellowship, the whole shoot and match. So she's amazing. So she is a teacher. She teaches humanities at a local prep school, and humanities, if some of the listeners aren't familiar, it's a combination of English and history, and she teaches ninth grade humanities. So she is brilliant. She's a professional knitter, and like literally she's a knitwear designer, and like I said, she's just amazing. So
that's cool.
For sure. And then as far as kids, we have 3 kids, and our oldest is coming up on 4 years out of college and got married 6 days after college graduation. So they've been married about 4 years, and they live in Baltimore. They both work for the government. Our middle child is our daughter, so we have boy, girl, boy. Our daughter is a year out from college. She graduated last May and works for a startup biotech firm in Boston. And so I have one in Baltimore, one in Boston, and then our youngest is a sophomore at IU, which is my alma mater. And so he's hoping to get into medicine and on a pre-med track, and we're excited for that for him.
Wow.
So yeah, so they're great kids. They are all walking with the Lord, and it's been fun, like all of us. Like, that wasn't always the case, but through God's just mercy and praying for our kids, and us making mistakes and just being real with our kids. Like, there are a number of times like I had to apologize to my kids and say, please ask Dad, please, Daddy needs to ask for forgiveness. And so we kind of walk through that. So tried to live it with our kids. So they're just good kids, and our daughter-in-law is amazing. So our daughter-in-law is one of those people, like, we joke, not seriously, but we joke saying, like, we'll trade in the other 3 kids and keep her. Like, she is so top shelf.
That's cool.
And I've said that to them to their face. So if they listen to this, it would be the first time they've heard it.
That's funny. Man.
Yeah.
Ironically, I was in the Air Force, and I was in Germany from 89 to 91. I got to Germany a month before the wall came down, and I was able to go to East Berlin. I didn't go to Mongolia or any of those, but
right.
But when Soviet Union broke up and Russia and all, it was neat to go into East Berlin and see how people had to live. It was like going back 100 years in time. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wasn't in. Let me think about this. The first time I was in Europe was about 1986, but didn't venture to Eastern Germany.
Yeah,
which at that time you couldn't. At that time the wall was up.
Yeah, it didn't come down till November timeframe of 89.
That's right. Yep.
Yep. I want to say it was like November.
Yeah, it was late 89.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't pinpoint it better than that either.
Yeah.
So we then after my family medicine residency, so we were in an amazing church. This is kind of back still on the faith journey part, at an amazing church in Indianapolis, where I did both my last 2 years of medical school, and then my 3 years of residency. And it now is a very large church of multiple thousands of people. But when we were there, it was about 400 people. And then when we left 5 years later, it was a little over 1,000. So it was neat to be in those early seminal years and see it grow and see God bless that church. So we ourselves were more recipients of what was going on in the church. Like, we weren't actively involved in any ministries. My wife probably was, and I was too buried in school to remember. But at that time, we had just our oldest son, who was born in December of my intern year. So if you've ever heard of medical training and the intern year, it's one of the busiest. And so in the midst of that, my wife gave birth to our oldest. And it's funny, earlier you were talking about holding a leg or things like that when your wife gave birth. In the joys of what I get to do, my wife said, "You get to deliver babies every day. You're holding my hand. Like, you're not down there. You're going to be up here by my head." So in other words, she said, "I want my husband, not my doctor."
Yeah.
So it was good to let somebody else sweat the labor instead of me. So
yeah. That's got to be a fascinating job, because I watching my daughter come into the world was just one of the most miraculous days of my life. But be able to bring life into the world and see that happen on a daily, weekly basis, however often, that's just got to be very rewarding.
It is, and it's still just as rewarding. It's still just as miraculous. I'm thankful for the professional experiences that I've had, which allow me a certain level of comfort and confidence that anybody that's just coming out of training, nothing will replace doing what you do for 23 years.
Yeah.
I would hope that any of us, whether it's woodworking or whatever, signs or IT or medicine, like, if you've been doing it for decades, like, hopefully you're better at it than when you started. Yeah. So anyway, so kind of fast forward, we then moved to Orlando. So I did my fellowship in Orlando, and we were in Orlando for a year, and which was for me a mountaintop experience. My fellowship experience was amazing. and I saw God do both on a personal and professional level amazing development, and I'm very thankful for that year. My wife, on the other hand, had more of a valley experience. She was home with our eldest. She was pregnant with our middle child, who delivered 7 days before we moved back to Indiana. So we moved back to Indiana with a 7-day-old, and we were plugged into a fantastic church. We had the best home group we've ever had at any of our home group experiences, and we're still friends with some of the people from that home group from our time in Orlando. And so we are thankful for that time there. I mentioned the kind of mountaintop and valley experiences. Pardon me. Because I'm sorry, guys. Because it wasn't until later, when we actually got settled here, probably a few months into practice, I was seeing a patient, and just the way she said something, it just clicked about some of the difficulties that my wife had alluded to, and probably had been telling me explicitly, but I just hadn't clued in. And so on this particular day, I went home and I told my wife about this particular appointment that I had, and I said, "Is this what you were trying to tell me when we were in Orlando about the challenges and the difficulties and the depression that you were struggling?" She said, "Yes, that's what I was trying to tell you." And I said, "I'm sorry. I didn't get it." She said, "No, you didn't. You were too busy. You were sleep deprived, and I forgive you." And that's just another testimony of God's mercy, you know. And I'm sure we've all had those where, you know, a child or your wife says something, your spouse says something, it just doesn't click, and you hear it in another context, and it's like, oh, that's what she was telling me. That's what he was telling me.
Yep. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So from there, so since we've been in our current locale, we've been 22 and a half years, and this coming July will be 22 years that we've been at our current church. And we go to an evangelical free church in a town about half an hour away. And it's a fantastic, thriving church. God is doing wonderful things there. It has, when we first started going, it was a church of a little over 105, 110. We now are, we average in the mid 600s. And so 630, 660. And we have an amazing pastoral staff. I think it was you, Will, who talked about your dad being in the E-Free church.
My father-in-law, my in-laws. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So I told you, I don't remember, this was during the podcast or before we started recording. I said, I've got a story, a connection to the E-Free church. So not growing up in the E-Free church, my dad grew up Catholic, and there was a traveling book salesman, and like a traveling like encyclopedia salesman, you know. So we're going a ways back, and this guy visited my parents' home. My grandparents said no. My dad struck a conversation, and in the process, this guy shared the gospel with my dad, and this guy was a member of, you know, they're in a suburb of Chicago, was a member of the E-Free church. So I kind of put all the pieces together in a haphazard way, and I talk about how my dad was saved in the E-Free church. So he didn't go to that church. He went to he ended up settling in a Baptist church. But still, when we were looking for church homes ourselves, we didn't specifically seek out evangelical free, but when I saw this church, I'm like, hey, like, I've got in my spiritual lineage, like, I have a connection to the E-Free church, because that's the church that my dad was saved in. And so that got us through the doors, and we've never looked back. It's been our church home ever since.
Now, just so people understand, that don't know, and I didn't know this until I started dating my wife and got it in the family. Evangelical free, when you hear the word free, it just means they're not tied to denomination, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I love that too. I mean, I love that you're clarifying that is what I meant, because sometimes people might hear, if they have any initiation into the Christian lingo, they may hear free and think free will. That is not it. We are very, like, the E-Free church is very much a Reformed tradition.
Right.
And the free is like you said. So there's a loose association. So there is like, a national
brotherhood.
headquarters. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But each church is elder run. So it's an elder led, elder run church. And the senior pastor sits as a voting elder on the elder board, but it's an elder run church. So, and speaking of that, like I have the privilege of serving as an elder. I'm in my 6th year of doing that. We do by our bylaws, we do 3 years on, and then you have to take 1 year off, and then you can be kind of renominated for another 3-year term. And of those 6 years, I've been lead elder. So you talked about your father-in-law being head
Right.
or something like that. So in our church, we call it lead elder. So I really have the privilege of serving intimately with our pastoral staff. Our pastor is coming up on a sabbatical. So also part of our bylaws, we have built in every 5-year sabbatical for the senior pastor. Actually, it's all pastors. And so that's where my preaching comes in this summer is we all kind of rotate through and have visiting pastors come in and other associate executive pastors step up. And there are a couple of us elders that will do it, but not everybody. But
it was funny. We just had this conversation Sunday.
Oh, how fun.
So I'm part of leadership at our church, and I got asked we have Sunday school. We're a small church of 150, and we don't call it Sunday school. We call it ABF, Adult Bible Fellowship.
Yep.
And it's a little more intimate, more small group kind of oriented. But I was asked to teach our class, and we're going to go through the book of Galatians. And so I've been doing a deep dive into Galatians and doing some studying up on it and stuff. And I found all my theology books from Bible school and stuff like that. So, but anyways, I was talking to one of the elders, and I said, because he mentioned something about how he's, going to be preparing some sermons, and how, it's probably due time that our pastor has a sabbatical. And I don't think it's in our bylaws, but it's something that I'm passionate about because I was in ministry and I know how burnout you can get.
Yes.
And taking some time off is extremely important.
Yeah, the way our church, and this isn't any credit to me, these are leadership decisions that were made before I got involved, but it was very good foresight for our senior pastor. So all the pastors, for every 5 years of active service, you get a sabbatical. Our senior pastor gets 3 months, and the other pastoral staff get 1 month. And they can kind of tie that to vacation time. So if they want to make it 6 weeks, you can kind of put your couple weeks there and dovetail those two to get a little longer break. But we purpose to give them sabbatical, and it's paid, so their salary is kept intact, and they are incommunicado. Like they, if things are burning down, okay, we'll reach out to them, but short of a massive event, like they are off limits.
Yeah, go try some other churches, go to retreats, go do some routine,
all the above. Yep, all the above.
There's so much scripture about rest, and obviously we all know about taking the Sabbath off, but if you read back stories like there, where it says every 7th year let the land rest. What are you doing while the land's resting? You're taking time off. You're not planting. You're not harvesting. And so I think it's important that we all, in this crazy world, that we just go all the time and forget the importance of rest. And so
speaking of rest and stuff, one of my favorite quotes ever that's come on this podcast, and I use it all the time, is those who work with their hands rest with their minds, and those who work with their minds rest with their hands.
Yeah, Drew Witt.
And so you're a doctor by day and you are a woodworker by night, which I think lines up, right? You work with your mind during the day. You are in it. I mean, obviously you work with your hands, do surgery and stuff like that. But so how does woodworking come into play here? How did you get into that? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to kind of go in that direction. So back to my dad. I grew up in a household where I never remember a service person coming to the house. Just one of those houses where whether it was the HVAC or plumbing or hey, let's build a whole new basement, let's throw some concrete out there, let's put up a fence. Like I just if my dad ever hired anything out, I have no memory of it because it was all him. And like I said, I was an only child, so it was all him. And honestly, a bit begrudgingly, it was me. Like I will admit that I begrudgingly helped dad. I was not one of those kids that was constantly by his side saying, "Ooh, let me do that. Let me do that." Like I will freely admit that was not me in my early years. So, but nonetheless, I mean, his example stuck with me. And so with that came a certain kind of under the radar confidence with all things construction. My dad is not in construction by trade. He's an engineer. He has his own fascinating story as far as his career path, but he basically is an engineer by trade. And so whether that's just his mechanical acumen and all that. So I just kind of developed a confidence with things building. So then when I got married and my wife and I had our first few houses, like the idea about tearing out a bathroom and running plumbing and, sweating pipes and all that goes into housework and running electrical, minus the junction box. When we get to the circuit breaker, hands off for me. Like somebody else is going to do that. But so anyway, so that kind of light construction and roofing and all that, I found that I enjoyed it. But what I really found I enjoyed, and this is how we get into the fine woodworking. What I really found I enjoyed was the finished carpentry. Like I liked making it look nice. I liked having my corners match, and I'm not OCD. Like I've got, kind of, if you talk about A/B personality, I'm probably A- because I can let some things slide. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. But that said, I liked making it look nice. And so there really was just a natural transition into, fine woodworking and furniture building. And I am self-taught. I can learn. So there are a couple of ways I feel God has wired my brain, and one is to think three-dimensionally. So it is not a difficulty for me to think three-dimensionally. And so when I see something, it's and I think a lot of woodworkers probably they may not be able to put words to it, but I think if they hear that, then it resonates with them, because I think just by the fact of having to devise a three-dimensional carcass or a frame and panel, or I want to make a bowl out of the chunk of firewood or whatever, like there has to be a certain element of being able to put together a three-dimensional idea from concept to design to building and implementation. So that's kind of one aspect of it. The other aspect is I do learn by seeing and doing. I certainly am a reader, so we haven't gotten into kind of the hobby side of things besides woodworking, but I'm a reader. And so I learned both ways, kind of hands-on and reading. So all that kind of led to just a lot of self-taught up here. And I'm sure it's the same where you guys are. Like we have tons of auctions. And so I get a lot of equipment from auctions early in my woodworking career. I got a ton of lumber at auctions where, farmers were clearing out barns, and yeah, I'll buy that, 800 board feet of red oak or whatever, and get it for pennies on the dollar. So a lot of it's just lots and lots of mistakes and a lot of self-teaching. And I will admit, I mean, as my day job does allow me to have resources, and I'm thankful for that. Like, I can spend a little money on tools as I got a little better in my skills in my craft, and I'm thankful for that. So yeah, so we've been in our current house for about 18 years. So January was 18 years. So I was well into. So I described to people that I've been doing woodworking for about 22 years. That doesn't kind of count the construction life before woodworking. So when we built our house 18 years ago, we designed it with a shop in mind. So we actually just live in town. We don't live out in the country. And I have a shop where we have a 3-car garage, and the third bay is the equipment. And then I built a shop above the two-car garage part, rather. And so that's where I do a lot of the handwork and some finish work. So yeah, so that's a lot of mistakes and a lot of graciousness from my family to spend time in the shop.
That's
Um,
cool. Yeah, you
yeah.
build some beautiful furniture, man.
Oh, you're really kind. I appreciate that. The website is up and running, and Instagram has simply been a fun way to learn ideas. And then I started putting stuff out there, and you know, it's not about the hits or the likes, but it's nice when people like what you do.
Yeah. It's I'd like Instagram for seeing other people like yours work, where I can get inspired, and because
Yes.
everybody's creativity is different, and
Hmm.
like people look at the same project from different angles, and I just that's what I like about
Hmm.
it. It's really neat to see other people's
Yes.
stuff and kind of get me motivated or inspired or give me a different
Hmm.
idea.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I used to play golf early in my years. I played golf and through high school actually. So this is another kind of God thing. There was a time where I thought about going like moving in toward the professional golfing track. Getting my the junior card and then kind of moving from there. And then my sophomore year in high school, I was in a motorcycle wreck,
Mm.
and it would have been either deadly or I would have been paralyzed if I weren't wearing a helmet. So I was hit from behind, and my head left a perfect helmet-shaped imprint in the guy's hood of his truck. I flew 100 something feet through the air, had a few broken bones, thankfully no head injury. But from that moment, it was about almost a year before I was able to play golf again. And there was like a switch that flipped. And after that, I simply played golf to have fun. There was not a competitive bone in my body. Um, but kind of used that to springboard into the woodworking connection. When my kids were younger, I felt guilty about being on the golf course for 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours. And I'm like, I like doing it, but I hate being away from the home. And so then that also kind of led to me setting aside the golf clubs and picking up the handsaw, as it were.
Yeah.
So
I used to play golf a lot before we had my daughter, and it was the
mhm,
same thing. After we
mhm.
had her, I felt guilty to go out to the course for 3 or 4 hours and
Yeah.
spend half of a day on a Saturday after working all week, and
Hmm. Right.
gave it up. But
Right.
it was
Yep.
fun.
Totally get it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it. I'll still hit the links, a time or two a year, but it's a time or two a year, not like a time or two a week
Yeah.
or more. So but that's another part of testimony of just how God takes certain events and just kind of changes your life direction or changes your perspective on things.
Yeah. Well, you've got a wide array of different projects you've done on your Instagram. What's your favorite type thing to build?
Oh, that's a great question. It has morphed over time. I do enjoy the furniture building side of things. I enjoy the small things, the dressers, the bookcases. So casework. I do really enjoy casework. Um, I've been so turning was kind of the last thing I added to my armamentarium, and I've only turned for about 7 or 8 years, but have enjoyed the worlds that has opened up, and I know that those who turn will understand and the joy of it all. Uh, but I would say the casework. The other thing, and I'm sure many of your listeners are like me in this, but I've never actually used a plan. Like everything that I've ever done has just been, hey, I see you, Will. Yeah, everything that I've done has just been kind of, well, what do I want it to look like, or what does the client want it to look like, or what's the need? Um, I guess I say casework, but the most that I've done are beds. I've done 10 or 11 beds of various sizes for all sorts of contexts, and so yeah, um, and lots of mistakes.
Yeah, I'm like you. I don't use plans. I'll
Hmm.
have the dimensions, and I
Yes.
resonated with the three-dimensional thing. One
Mm.
of the things that I remember taking the ASVABs in high school, and I
Sure. Yeah.
scored it. I scored extremely high in the mechanical because I
Right.
can picture an engine and I can
Hmm.
explode it in my head and
Hmm.
know what the parts are and stuff like that. And so
Right.
like when I've built stuff, it's like yeah, I know I need it to be 26 wide by 16 deep
Hmm.
and 30 high. Okay.
Right.
And then from there I just go. Yeah. It's all up here. It's funny because I built an end table, and my wife's not very picky, and I just said, "Hey, I've got an idea.
Mhm.
I'm gonna do this whole end table without using any fasteners, so it's all gonna be hand joinery."
Oh yeah.
And I said, "And I want to try different techniques on stuff." And so I built this thing, and it came out really nice, but there's no plan. There was no,
Right.
so.
I get that. I think I probably take a hybrid approach. So I don't, like I mentioned, like with you, Will, don't use a plan to start, but I have a sketchbook and I will sketch things out to the nth detail. And so I'll sketch it out to the, to the 32nd of the inch. And I'll use that for my design process. And in that, I'm sure like a lot of listeners, a lot of woodworkers the same way. Like you write it down, and you think, well, that's not going to work because of that, ability to see it three-dimensionally. I put it on paper, like, no, that's not going to work. That joint's going to be too stressed, or, that's going to look wonky, or the ratio is going to be off. So it's just fun. It's fun.
That's how I do mine. I'm a sign maker, so I use Corel Draw. And so when I build a piece of furniture, I draw it. But the problem with Corel Draw is it's a 2D program. So,
yes.
But I have been taking Bob Clagett's course on Fusion 360, learning it. And I'm really looking forward to finishing it and being able to have a 3D drawing of what's in my head before. Because it all comes from my head, but I like to have it drawn out, have a cut list, everything before I start. But
sure, yeah. And this is my I'll say immaturity or kind of youth in the whole commercial woodworking world is, I'll have clients come up and they'll want me to make something for them, and being able to price it accurately has been a challenge. So, and that of course encapsulates the design too. They're like, well, I want it to look like this and so forth. And to be able to have a model or be able to show the client, like, this is what it's going to look like. Sometimes it's hard to translate that and get that out of your brain onto something that, somebody else that's just walking off the street can appreciate and understand.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think those are the things that I enjoy the most.
So do you sell a lot of pieces? Because I mean, with you being a full-time doctor, how do you have time to do that?
How do I do it? So one of the beauties of woodworking, and one of the ways that I think it really works well with my lifestyle, is this: like, I can start a project, and I can be, let's say, just working through a process, working through a project. I can be halfway through a step and set it down, go take care of whatever I need to take care of. And I may come back 2 hours or 2 months later, and I'll just pick up where I left off. So I usually have multiple projects going on at a time, and they're in different stages, except when it comes to finishing. The finishing process is something that takes some forethought. And I do have a shop that I have heat in, but I don't keep it heated continuously. And Will, you talked about that in the past podcast about not really enjoying going out in the wintertime. And I have the blessing of being able to heat the shop up and get it above about 55, so I can put some finish on, and it'll stick pretty well. And finishing itself has been quite the journey. For about a decade, I sprayed gallons of lacquer, pre-cat lacquer, for probably a decade, and really got comfortable with that. But over the past 15 years, now 12, 13 years, have gone to hand finishes. So, whether we're talking, of course, all of the hard wax finishes like Willie's Wood Finish, love it. Or, the other stuff that is well known out there that all are great products. What I've learned is they're not interchangeable. Like, as I'm doing more and more, like, hey, this is a project that Rubio is good for. This is a project that Willie's is good for. This is a project that Walrus is good for. I tell you, there's a new one that I've started using. I've used about a quarter. It's called Gilboys, Gilbylys. It's out of the UK. This stuff is fantastic. One of the recent projects I did was with it, and it's relatively inexpensive. And you do 2 coats, like you do a coat, sand it for about 320 grit, put a second coat on, and it has a nice medium rub sheen, and it dries really hard. And you can get it pretty inexpensively on Amazon. I'm a big Odie's fan. I probably should have bought stock in them years ago, but so I've kind of migrated to the finishes. And the most recent one I've started to get into is French polishing. So I've actually done some classic French polishing. So Tom, you familiar with
what that is, Tom?
I've never done it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so French polishing, it's from the 1700s, and there is a company out of New Jersey called Lubricite, 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 and they make the stuff you need for French polishing, and they're a fantastic company. And it's an art. I'm definitely on the learning curve, not a master, but love what the French polishing what that tool has allowed me to draw from my toolbox. So,
and how does that process work?
Oh, so it's actually pretty involved. So you take let's say a wad of cheesecloth, and you charge it. So you soak it with the French polish, and you basically use it as a dabber, and you wipe it across the wood. And then it's quick motions. You go back and forth, quick motions. You do that again. You don't let the dauber, you don't let the cloth dry out. You got to keep recharging it. And you kind of get a coat or two on, let it flash off for about 24 hours, light sanding, put another coat on or two. And then from there, it's almost like it's like a mystery happens, because then you have this thing called flashing that has to happen, and you put this kind of top coat on with a really light touch, and it leaves this beautiful hard shiny surface that's almost perfect. Like, you think some of the museum pieces you've seen that have just this perfect polish finish, that's almost always French polishing.
Wow. And so what is the French polish made of?
Well, it is, it's usually like a proprietary blend of, like the typical, boiled linseed oil, beeswax, stuff like this. Classically, and I know many of the listeners will correct me on this, I'd have to look it up. And then if you guys, look it up, and you can certainly absolutely correct me. I'd say my best advice is look up this company, Lubricite, because they really are a good company that have done it for decades and decades and decades and decades.
Okay, so, I'll look that up.
Yeah, and they sell everything. I mean, they sell the cheesecloth or whatever, and it was very inexpensive. I think I don't remember what a gallon cost, but I got a gallon of the French polish, and I barely touched it after probably the equivalent of a dining room table, amount of use, and I barely used any of the gallon.
Wow.
I know. I just looked it up because I thought I was right. So the desk that I'm using, I finished in shellac.
Yes,
but I did it in a French polish style, and shellac is used with thinning it out to do a French polish. So like this
shellac,
desk is a cherry desk. And I put I want to say 15 coats or something.
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. We do these thin coats. Like, it's a really slow build. Like, it really does take multiple coats. I did a tea box for my mom, and I think I put 11 coats on it to get the final build that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, shellac. Thank you, not boiled linseed oil. So thank you for correcting me on that.
Very cool. Well, what you got working in your shop right now?
So I have a couple of projects that are, one is probably 80% done and one is probably 40% done. So the 80% done is a table for a client for their game room. And it is they are calling it a Disney themed table. My wife says I can't call it a Mickey Mouse table because that's proprietary.
Oh, is that what the mouse ears shape thing
exactly,
on your...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just got the legs on today. I'm doing bent plywood for the apron because, of course, it's round. So I put those wooden tension bars across the bottom, and that really has kept it nice and flat. It's about it's probably 13/16, not quite 7/8 thick, red oak, and then I'm going to do a black stain to match, what you typically think of as like a Mickey Mouse ears black. So I'll do that. So I got the legs on today. I got the bent laminate or the bent plywood all cut. I just need to put it in place, and then I'll be ready to do a final sanding and get a finish on it in the next week or two.
Wow.
And then the other is a special project. This will kind of get us off track a little bit, but a special project of a family in our church, their daughter passed away a year ago of a very aggressive brain tumor. And she died a couple of weeks before our granddaughter. And so we've not talked about we had a granddaughter who died a year ago, right after birth. So much mercy of God in that circumstance. So this family approached me and asked me to build a cedar memento box for their daughter. So I've got the cedar all dimensioned. I just need to basically do the assembly, and I'm trying to decide if I want to do hand cut nails or if I want to do hand cut dovetails. So I actually love doing hand cut dovetails. It's a process I'm still trying to get good at, but I just do. I love hand cut dovetails.
You use Japanese saws or traditional Western saws?
That's a great question. So early in my woodworking career, probably about 15 years ago, was Japanese, and that was just easier to control. But I have migrated into the classic Western saw camp. I am fortunate. I'm blessed. I have a saw from Eric Florup, whom many listeners might remember. He was from Michigan, a sawmaker, former military, and passed away of a brain tumor a little over a year ago now. So I'm blessed to have two of his saws, and then other nice saws, Lee Nielsen, etc. And then I will say, this is credit to my wife. I am blessed to have a saw from Shane Skelton, who is a saw maker in the UK, and he is amazing. It's one of those where literally to get on the waiting list is a year, and then it's a 1.5 year waiting list to get your saw. So it's crazy, but it is an amazing piece of art. I gravitate toward the Western style.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. So there you go, guys.
What about you, Will? You still working on the Quack Shack?
Yeah, so we're on the Quack Shack. I got the sheathing and purlins on the roof, so then the weather's turned, and so I got to put that metal on at some point, but haven't got back out in the shop. I do need to get out there now that the weather's warmer. I got to clean the shop and get a good, solid, clean surface somewhere, and then I can start figuring out what I'm going to do. But yeah, so not too much in the realm of woodworking. I am working on some Bibles for a giveaway that just finished up, and so got to finish those up, and so some more leather work still. But how about you, Tom? Been out in the shop making some sawdust?
No, well, I did a little. Just mostly French cleat holders, getting some tools up on the wall, but still working on finishing the design for I'm going to make my next big project, making a bed. As soon as we get all the crops planted and I get shop time, I'm going to build a new king-size bed for our bedroom. So I'm like you. I enjoy building beds. I've built several of them, and so looking forward to having time to do that. But I worked in Moab 2 days last week, and then I'm going back to Moab next week for another 2-day project. And so in the midst of trying to get stuff done on the farm and then still work, and of course today was tax day, getting all the taxes done and the joy of that. But but not much. I would probably say realistically I got about a week and a half, 2 weeks before I get to start the bed.
Nice.
Very good. Well, man, Chris, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and talking about your journey from where you came from, 4 years old, to where you are now, and we really, really appreciate it and love love getting different people. I think you're the first physician doctor that we've had. And, so it's cool to have so many different walks of life. Everybody from, woodworking cabinet makers to IT guys to YouTubers to, anybody. I love it. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Amen.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, until next week, I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.